Ok. Bueno, bienvenidas y bienvenidos todos quienes llegan a esta presentación. Hoy estamos aquí en el Congreso de Salud Femenina con Sophie Messager, que es una persona que tuve el gusto de conocer aquí en el Reino Unido y pues estoy encantadísima de que se haya unido al proceso. Ella ha hecho una investigación muy extensa sobre las tradiciones del posparto y ha escrito un libro que se llama Why Postnatal Recovery Matters, que está en proceso además de ser traducido a otros idiomas, o sea que pronto ojalá en español también. Y pues la hemos invitado a que nos cuente un poquito para en el marco de este congreso, para que podamos conocer su trabajo y explorar como todo lo que tiene que ver con las tradiciones alrededor del posparto, que es una parte fundamental de la salud. Entonces, vamos a tener esta charla en inglés. Mm, y aquí les dejo con Sophie para que les cuente sobre su trabajo. So, Sophie, welcome to the summit. Welcome to the Congreso de Salud Femenina. We're so pleased that you're here. You know, I'm a big fan of your work, and I really thought that we needed to have you in it because I think it's so valuable, and postpartum is such like a massive part of women's health, and yet so forgotten, isn't it? So, so I'm just thrilled that you're here with us, and I'll leave you to it, and then we can have a little chat at the end, okay?
Thank you, Laura. I'm delighted to be talking at your conference. It's such an important topic. So, the more we can, every opportunity to pass this message is something that is feel like the very important thing to do. So I'm going to
Definitely.
start sharing my screens and present the presentation I have. And then what we'll do is at the end of this, when I'd finished going through the presentation, Laura and I will have a little Q&A session about the topics in the presentation. So I've given this talk a title called Common Threads in Postpartum Traditions. And that's because what I've tried to do in my work is to go away from what doing it like this culture or doing it like that culture, because the problem with that is it might not fit with the individual family. Each family is unique. So I've tried to work towards showing what the main four parts, and you will see I go through that in details during the presentation, what the main four parts of postpartum traditions around the world are. So a bit about me. I was a biology research scientist for 20 years. I turned doula about 10 years ago. And so I have about 10 years experience as a perinatal educator, both an antenatal teacher, a birth and postnatal doula and doula mentor, and a workshop facilitator. I love my specialist sort of signature approach is to blend science and traditional knowledge. And I'm the author of a book called Why Postnatal Recovery Matters. And I'm on a mission to revolutionize the postpartum, to move from a place of loneliness and guilt back towards one of nurture and support. Oops. So a quick overview of the talk is I'm going to give you a historical perspective. I'm going to tell you what's wrong with our culture, and I'm going to go through the 4 pillars of postpartum recovery and explain how we can recreate postpartum support in the modern world. And then finally, we'll have a Q&A session. So historically, everywhere around the world, in fact, some places still have it, there is or was an understanding that giving birth is a major life transition, and therefore there was a lot of rituals to support it. So worldwide, what we still have and used to have in other culture, like the Western culture, is a period of rest of and nurture postpartum for about a month. And people don't realize how it was part of Western culture not that long ago, and I found evidence historically of something called the groaning in the UK, which involved a period of postpartum where there was special groaning cake and groaning ale and groaning cheese that was given to the new mother. And I found in an interview I did with a British midwife called Becky Reed that when she was born in 1951, her mother was given a lady from the council to look after her house for 2 weeks. So that was 70 years ago, which means it's not like in 300 or 500 years that we've lost it. It's in living memory. And I'm going to explain to you why we need it back, that period of rest and nurture after the birth. What's wrong with our culture is not only have we lost the completely lost postpartum tradition and rituals. Well, we have rituals, but they're medical rituals. They're not nurturing rituals. But we also have a complete lack of understanding of the needs of new mothers and the needs of new babies. And we have a misplaced focus that means that the entire interest of society is on the baby rather than being on the mother. And we also, on top of that, we have societal pressure. So a society that does not only support new mothers, but expect them to, the right thing is to go back in the supermarket when your baby is 3 days old, which is completely crazy. So there's like this really bad, double whammy of no support, and then this kind of it's seen as a badge of honor to be like coping, to be doing it all on your own, to be managing to be going back to normal, as if there was such a thing after you just had a baby. So the 4 pillars of postpartum recovery, they are globally rather than culture specific. They are social support, rest, food, and body work. And social support is the first one because the other 3 rest on the presence of other people around the house to support the new mother. So social support, as I just said, it is the foundation on which everything else is built. And the social support provide emotional, practical, and informational support. Simply people to do the chores, cook some food. We're going to go into more details in that. Hold the baby whilst you sleep, reassure you that you're doing a good job, give you practical tips when you struggle with something, and just generally mother you whilst you learn to mother your baby. So what makes good support is people who look after you rather than expect to be waited upon. And one of the problems with visitors that I've heard through the years of being a postnatal doula is that visitors often turn up and expect that you're going to entertain them and they're going to be given tea and cake and they just hold your baby and then be served. And that's not what visitors, that's not what we should have in people who visit new parents. They should be bringing a casserole and offering to take a load of laundry and only take the baby if the mother is happy for them to take the baby. And also good support is people who are non-judgmental and support your choices because, again, new mothers tell me all the time that they get very conflicting advice and very judgmental advice from family members. And good support are also people who boost your confidence. So it's important to choose the right people if you want people to nurture you rather than expect to be entertained. So creating a support network, and it's casting your net as wide as possible and think through, okay, who can support me during the postpartum? So clearly your partner if you have one, but it's not enough to rely on the support of just one person, especially in a world that tend to give partners a couple of weeks of leave after the birth of a baby, and then you're expected to cope entirely on your own. Family, friends, and neighbors. A neighbor could be, delivering you some food and that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be necessarily just people you're really close friend with. Also, clearly, doulas and other professional of perinatal support, online support as well, and the idea of preparing for all scenarios so that you're not left high and dry. I'm going to talk more about how we can prepare for that, how we can prepare for the postpartum at the end of the presentation. So the second pillar of the postpartum is rest. It is logical after growing and birthing another whole human that there should be a period of rest. I often say that if men gave birth, there would be some kind of Cambridge professor of the postpartum. The fact that we don't encourage rest, we don't understand that new mothers need rest, especially when it's compounded by the fact that they are looking after a new baby 24/7 and losing sleep, and also that they usually being a new mother mean that you have somehow lost your sense of identity as you recreate a new identity. You're like a caterpillar going into a butterfly. So all of that challenge together, the physical challenge and emotional challenge and the identity challenge, it makes sense that you would need rest to recover from that. And I make an analogy to recovery process for athletes. So athletes know that if they run a marathon, they need a period of rest and recovery. And I find it really crazy that we live in a culture that still understands that somebody who's run a marathon needs some rest, but that doesn't understand that somebody who's grown and birthed a baby doesn't. So some ideas for a restful postpartum, again, planning ahead, using naps and early nights. There's a lot of wisdom in sleep when the baby's sleep, prioritizing sleep over chores, choosing supporters wisely so they will encourage you to rest rather than expect you to be running around, delegating, doing mindset work and relaxation techniques because, well, mindset work is that many new mothers find it really hard to basically accept to be looked after, asking for help in a culture that puts individuality as a top quality, as a top value. The idea that you cope on your own is seen as a sign of strength. So not asking for help, it requires a lot of vulnerability. So doing mindset work around this is important. And relaxation technique is because, well, it's very useful to relax, to learn to keep yourself in a grounded space when you have a new baby, but also because lots and lots of first-time new mothers who have never taken naps before have told me they find it really hard to fall asleep during the day because, well, again, there's this mindset of you must be lazy if you sleep during the day, but also when you have a baby who sleeps in 45 minutes sleep cycle and you lie down thinking, oh my God, I must go to sleep, I must go to sleep. Many moms tell me they find it really hard to fall asleep with that kind of pressure. So going to lie down with a goal of relaxation rather than sleep can mean that sleep comes more easily. And even if it doesn't come, then it's more restful to lie down than to sit or stand around. So the third pillar of the postpartum is food. And it should go without saying that good nutrition is essential for recovery. People still understand in our culture that somebody who's recovering from illness needs good nutrition when they're convalescing from it. We still have like chicken soup and things like that. It's difficult to provide yourself with good, hearty food when you're caring for a newborn. And so the need to plan and getting support for things like organizing meal trains, ideally somebody else organizing it for you, food delivery service, batch cooking and freezing ahead, having ways of getting food other than just relying on yourself is a really good idea. Good postpartum food is very simple. Again, when you look at all culture around the world, each culture is going to eat very different food, but what the foods have in common is they're nutritious. They're usually easy to eat, like including one-handed. They're easy to digest, and the food is warm, as in literally warm, as in not cold, but also usually contains warming ingredients because postpartum wisdom around the world understands that it's very important to keep new mothers warm. So, for instance, in the Chinese tradition, you do not drink or eat anything cold at all during the postpartum. And the fourth pillar is body work. And I'm going to talk a bit more length about this one than I have the other three because it seems to me, I'm more passionate about this one because it seems to me that this is the least used out of the four in the Western world. It is the least understood. And it is the least well served. People don't understand that new mothers need body work. When you think about the changes that occur during pregnancy and the postpartum, with the uterus growing from the size of a pear to the size of the watermelon and then back down again, and all this change in the shape of the spine and the hips and the ribs and the whole body changes, and that it has to undergo those changes in reverse during the postpartum, it's not surprising that tradition around the whole world always included some form of body work in the form of massage, wrapping, and again the keeping warm. That's common to every culture around the world, the understanding that the new mother needs to be kept wrapped up and kept warm because it's very important to her health and her recovery. So what we have with our lack of postpartum bodywork support in the Western world is a lack of understanding of the need of postpartum bodies, no checkups at all within the health system except for France, which does some form of perinatal re-education within the health system. But in the UK, for instance, there's a total lack of ability of detecting and treating issues effectively. Women tend to go for a 6 weeks check, but there is no actual physical exam during this check. It's just a chat, it's just a 10-minute appointment. So this lack of ability, the lack of understanding and the lack of detection of problems means that research shows that it takes on average 8 to 10 years postpartum for women to seek help for issues like incontinence. So 1 in 3 women as for instance urinary incontinence post-birth. There is also I've read some surveys done by the NCT that shows that out of those women who have incontinence, the embarrassment means that they're quite unlikely to seek help from even medical professionals because they just don't want to talk about it. And again, because what we don't talk about it, then people don't know what's normal, so they think that it's normal, but it's not. And then you add that lack of support to an unhealthy pressure to go back to normal, and you've got this kind of really terrible mix of it's not surprising that new mothers end up suffering for no good reason. So what kind of support can you get in terms of body work in the postpartum? So postpartum massage, specific massages such as, for instance, the closing of the bone massage, which is some kind of massage and wrapping practice that again existed in most part of the world. Seeing specialist therapists like osteopath, chiropractor, or pelvic health physiotherapist, doing some postnatal specific exercise and rehab, learning ways to support your belly. I'm going to go a bit in more details about that in the next slide. And understanding that during the first 6 weeks, contrary to mainstream belief, it is when you need those things the most. So not waiting until 6 weeks postpartum to have all this body work, because people always say, oh, wait until you've had your 6 weeks check. And the 6 weeks check is not an exam. It's not a physical palpation examination. So you've got this weird, oh, don't do anything until you've had no checks at 6 weeks and then everything is fine after that. Which means, people take that very seriously. Like they think that it's really not okay to massage during the first 6 weeks. And yet what we know from my own experience and reading around the topic and postpartum tradition around the world, there's such a wonderful plastic window of opportunity during those first 4 to 6 weeks post-birth that you can heal very fast if you do the work then. Whereas if you wait, it takes longer to get it, to achieve the same thing. Postpartum wrapping is something I love because anybody can do it. You do not need a specialist therapist to do it for you. On some physical level, it simply provides support for unstable joints and muscles, provides some emotional support, makes you feel contained, provides warmth and comfort. It's even helpful post-cesarean as well. And I've written a blog called The Lost Art of Postnatal Wrapping, which you can just find by Googling the title, or just go on my website and look for it, where I encourage women to experiment, because there's many different items you can use. So in this picture here, I use a rebozo scarf to wrap a mother who was literally 24 hours post-birth. But you can use Velcro wraps, you can use specific belts that are designed for that. You can use even things like underwear that has a bit of containment. So the idea of that, the supporting the body in the first few weeks postpartum is a really good idea. And again, something I found to be part of every culture, including the British culture in the last century. So how can we make this happen in our modern world? Because it's all fine and good to say, oh, we used to have all this and then we don't have it, and you should make it happen like it was 100 years ago. And I know that's not reasonable. So ways to make it happen in our modern world is to write a postnatal recovery plan, hire some help, put as much support in place ahead of time. And one of the ways to do this as well is to have a mother blessing. So how do you write a postnatal recovery plan? Well, it's really easy. It's exploring what's important for you, imagining yourself in the first few weeks after you've given birth. Use the 4 pillars of postnatal recovery as a map to either wrap or make a mind or draw or whatever appears more, have a conversation with people. Just jot down some ideas. If it feels daunting, I say to people, most people don't put any planning in that period of time at all. So if you only write 5 ideas on bullet point on a piece of paper, you'll have done more than 99% of people. So anything you can put into, okay, how can I make sure I get enough social support, rest, body work, and so forth in the postpartum? And on my website, there's a free PDF template I've designed that is just a piece of paper, an A4 piece of paper with 4 boxes of each of the 4 categories of postpartum body work. So another aspect of support is that many of us in the modern world don't live close to our families or don't belong to close-knit communities, and therefore it's kind of hard to get that support if all you have is a partner and nobody else around. And so, in that sense, it makes a lot of sense to hire help. There are people who are specialists in this area, like doulas. And you can also consider having nannies and mother helps and cleaners, and basically trying to outsource as much of the running of the house as possible, and making sure there's somebody, another pair of hands to help look after you. It's really well worth the investment. And people often say to me, "Oh, what can if I can't afford a doula?" Well, there are specialist support in place for people with free support for people who really cannot afford it. And then there's all sorts of creative way around making sure you get support. If you can't afford, if you don't qualify to free support, but you can't quite afford somebody who's supporting you, is to ask people to gift you money towards vouchers towards a doula, gift you money towards vouchers towards, body work and all that kind of stuff. Encouraging people to make gift towards the mother rather than towards the baby, because people buy, when I was talking earlier in a conversation about the misplaced focus, people buy tons of useless bits of gifts for the baby, like stuffed toys and tiny little baby clothes that are too small 2 weeks after the birth. And the baby doesn't really care about those things. What the baby needs is to feel nurtured and supported, and so therefore it makes a lot of sense that the support should go towards the parents so they feel rested and strong enough to be able to look after the baby. And one of the beautiful ways to start directing the support towards the mother is to have a mother blessing instead of having a baby shower. So a mother blessing is like a mother shower. It's a mother-centered alternative to a baby shower. You get to gather around a group usually of women to pledge support and to give you nurture and make you feel special, but it's also the perfect time to organize asking for pledges of support for the postpartum. So when I run mother blessings for pregnant women, I bring that PDF document that I've made available to download on my website. I bring the PDF postnatal recovery plan, and I circulate it around, and I ask people to write at least one pledge in one of the 4 categories that they promised to give to the mother after the birth. And then I also ask them to speak aloud that pledge as we go around the circle, to make sure that there's a promise there and the promise not going to get forgotten after the baby's born. It's really good idea to have someone to be in charge of organizing the pledges, to call upon the people after the birth, so the mother doesn't have to be the one organizing this. And finally, I would like to say postpartum is the postpartum is a window of opportunity. So traditional culture around the world understand or understood that a postpartum period is like a reset opportunity, and understanding that if you look after your health during that time, you'll enjoy better health in your old age than you would have if you don't look after yourself. And in fact, there's a, it's really an investment in future health, and I cannot help but wonder in our world today, in the modern world, we missed that window, and what are the impacts on future health for the mother. So it's not a selfish thing, it's to see, okay, there's this beautiful plastic window of opportunity for healing. So my hopes is to have helped you understand that what we currently have is not only abnormal, it is detrimental to new families and society. And I hope to have demonstrated that social support, rest, food, and body work are paramount, and how to try and implement them within our world. If you want to learn some more and explore this topic further, I have written a book called Why Postnatal Recovery Matters, which is available online, both on my website, but also on the publisher's website, Pinter and Martin, any of the online book retailers. I've written a book resource page on my website, sophiemessager.com, where you can find all the links that are shared in the book, including lots of ideas for postpartum food and access to resources for the postpartum support. I share a lot of stories and videos and tidbits of information around this topic on my Instagram, Sophie Messager. I have a lot of articles on my blog about this topic. And finally, reminding you that on the front page of my website, I have this free postnatal recovery plan template, which you can use to start thinking about support for the postpartum. And thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, how wonderful. Thank you, Sophie. This is so. I mean, I obviously I have your book and I follow you and everything, but it's just so like every time I hear you, it's like, yes, this is so important, and it's just like we're in such need, aren't we, of this of recovering these traditions. I have a few questions or things that I would like you to expand on. Mm, I know that you work on like loads of things like regarding women's health, and you always have like a million projects in your head and happening at the same time. So I wanted to know, what made you decide on this one, like to tackle first, like to write the book, to what made you say, okay, first postpartum.
Yeah.
What was that thing that said, yes, this is the theme that I want to tackle first?
It's interesting because originally, um, I thought I'm going to write a book about reposo and postpartum like practice around that aspect, but then I thought I need to make something more general because there's so much more at stake. Didn't want the book to be too niche. I wanted it to be easily readable by birth workers and by parents alike. And to be honest, what made me write the book was mostly frustration at
Mm,
listening to the stories of new mothers. So what I found myself doing, so what led me to the all of that topic was learning the closing the bone massage in 2013. And because I'm an intensely nosy and curious person, after I learned this practice, I just went to the primary school my kids went to at the time, and Cambridge is very multicultural. So I started asking all the moms who I could see weren't English. I said, what do you have in your country after the birth? And then as I started listening to the story, I was like, I mean, I did that for years. Every time I met someone who wasn't born in the UK, I would be like, what do you do to your country? And, what do they do like to mothers in your country? And the stories I got were like, like this friend of mine was the babies in India. She said, "Oh, when I had my babies in India, my mum hired this old lady from the village, who gave me a full body massage every day for a month." I'm not postpartum, but I quite fancy a full body
the
massage.
dream.
Yeah. And then this other, I remember this other mother, she was from Kenya, and she said, "Oh, you don't even wash yourself." She said, "You don't lift a finger. People
Yeah.
fight over who's cooking you dinner." I was like, wow. And there's just all these stories kept pouring in. And then at the same time as all these stories kept pouring in, I was postnatal doula in New Moses and witnessing the other side of the spectrum. And I was hearing the same story over and over again, which is a mother who struggles
Mm,
and then blames herself for it. So what I mean by frustration is I wrote lots of ranty blogs before the book where I would come home from having, like, I still can picture in my head, I was with a new mother who had a 3-year-old child and a 3-month-old baby, and she said to me, "I don't understand why I'm so tired." And I went like, "Well, honey, you're tired because, you have 3-year-old and a 3 months old." And then she said, everybody else seems to be coping better than me. And that's what I mean, the frustration. I was like, no, everybody else is lying. What you see is the Instagram culture. People, there's this almost like a vicious circle. People think everybody else is doing better, so therefore they lie. And
mm,
so the lie gets perpetuated. So, but also what made me write the book was noticing that we were blind to it. So
yeah.
keep hearing the same story over and over again from new mothers, blaming themselves, saying I'm not doing anything, struggling, and but also having shame around the struggle because of that belief that everybody else is coping better. And then trying to reframe it over and over again, but sensing it wasn't coming in because when you're blind to a bias, you can't see, right? So when I was started to write the book, like when I started to think, okay, I'm going to write this book now, I kept walking around with a notebook all the time. And I remember one day, I suddenly had, when you get downloads and you're like, I realized that when I was teaching antenatal classes, I didn't talk about that. I talked about the immediate postpartum body in terms of like blood loss and breast
Mm,
milk and stuff. And I talk about baby care and I talked about the changing relationship between the parent, but I didn't talk about the mother in terms of like her recovery. And the moment that came to me, I was like, oh my God, if I
Yeah.
didn't know, what are the chances that anybody does? So I wanted to spread the word as much as possible. And the blogs, when I wrote these ranty blogs, I at least wrote 3 or 4 blogs around the topic, like quite sweary ones at once. One of them was called "Slow the fuck down," because again I saw women who had post-cesarean with a newborn and a toddler, and who had an infection in their scar, and were blaming themselves, like saying, "I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. Or like women judging their bodies, going, "I'm fat."
Mm.
Those stories, like keeping hearing that all the time, like everything, like the self-judgment, the loneliness, the guilt, the shame,
Yeah.
and I was like, this is dire. This is all happening to you because you're not getting what you're meant to be getting.
Yeah.
So, even you say, oh, I love listening to that. When I hear myself, I'm still going, oh my God, this is so bad. How did I
Yes,
get there?
yes, yes. It is. It really is bad. That's why I love listening to you. Just because it's like, yes, let's talk about this some more. And when you were saying that, you were asking around, like, to the other people from other cultures, but yet when you did the research for the book, you found out that these traditions were even a thing here in the UK,
That's right.
and not too long ago. What do you think happened in the last 50 years or so that we lost the last bits of this postpartum care?
I think so. Again, that's something I wish somebody had written about the history of how we lost it, because I haven't been able to find any published
Mm,
research or anything that says this is why we lost it. But I think it's a combination of factors. It's a combination of shrinking of it's people living in individual families, right, rather than
yeah,
multi-generational homes. It's you know I mean, yesterday I was talking to someone who was from Ghana, and he said to me, that's a story I keep hearing, by the way, since I talk about this. People say, their grandma told them that what I talked about in the book. That I've had several women I've done Closing the Bones to over the last few weeks who said their mother or their grandmother said they should have it, but they dismiss it as being some kind of old bullshit, old,
oh yeah,
like we don't need
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
And then eventually, sometimes it takes more than one child that they start to realize, actually, I really need some kind of, the first time you don't
yeah,
really know what's hitting you. And it's really, so I think it's a mix of nuclear families, people not being within the community, and having handed over the entire support to the health system. But at the same time, the health system has shrunk because it's not being funded properly. So because midwives who have been around in the UK for a long time, I have several friends who are midwives who are in their 60s or 70s. They said to me, in the 1980s, we used to have, 70s and 80s used to have like 10 days in hospital. And then when you give birth at home, you had this support from the council or the community. And that they said, you were having midwife visit. One of my friends said in the 1980s, a new mother who had been given birth at home would have daily visit morning and afternoon from the midwife for at least like 8 or 10 days after the birth. And so, this kind of weird system where we just go, oh, this is belonging to the medical realm, this is their job.
yeah,
But then the medical realm goes, don't have time or money for that. So you end up,
yeah.
it kind of falls into a void.
Yes,
And then
totally,
people,
totally.
the combination of that and the dismissiveness of like it being some kind of old fashioned, that it doesn't have any evidence to back it up scientifically. Because when I read I found a lot of papers that look at the traditional postpartum, if this culture or that culture, or especially culture that still even have it today, like in China. I've noticed that South America, Africa, and Asia tend to still have it. And in the papers, people go, "Oh, this is all bollocks." Like they write, the tone of the scientific paper is like, "Well, all unbased, beliefs that are not based on science." And I'm like, "What?" Like there's even some papers that say that evidence has shown this is not true, except there isn't any. So this is a really weird So that's the word weird. So I'm very grateful. Last year I was doula to a woman who is an anthropologist. Her name is Elle Fleming, and she introduced me to this thing, and I think that has a lot to do with it. It's an acronym called WEIRD, Western Educated, Independent, Rich, Democratic Societies. And it's basically that paper says that WEIRD societies, that 92% of the research come from less than 12% of the population. And so
Yeah,
what we think is true, what we think is normal, and again, in a culture that thinks that it's something that hasn't been published in a peer-reviewed journal is not true, it's like woo. That's what's going on. We have a very sharp,
that's terrible.
very narrow, very, very like closed-minded focus on what constitutes normal.
Very, very. And it's that's probably one of the biggest challenges we face at the moment. It's like kind of reframing and stepping away from uh, that way of thinking in which, like, where does this knowledge belong to, and what is true and what isn't true. And that's, I guess, one of the pillars of this summit is putting the knowledge of people themselves can kind of back on the stage,
Yeah,
because that's where we have the chance to build and kind of reclaim it for ourselves,
right.
and taking it from the medical system, who is clearly let it go into this void, as you said.
Yeah.
So
And
there
the medical
needs to
system
be
only
this.
looks at it from the angle of pathology.
Yeah, yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't look at health. It looks at, is something wrong? You know, if
Yes,
there's
yes.
something not wrong, then it's fine.
And this is what we've been talking about, like, in the and we'll be talking about during the summit, is what that health is more than like absence of disease, so this is clearly part of that same way of thinking
Yeah.
which has brought us here. And then the last thing in that in to that respect, I also wanted to ask you this, because I think this resonates with that kind of thinking, and is, you've mentioned that we do have rituals now, but they're medical rituals.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to tell us just a little bit about how rituals impact health, for better or worse, and what's your experience with that? Because obviously, because I am big on rituals, and I want to know what you've discovered, and just to share your view with us.
But it's really it's a fascinating question because just recently I read a book called Reclaiming Birth as a Rite of Passage by midwife Rachel Reed, who's an Australian midwife. And I used to think we don't have rituals. And I read a book and I realized, yeah, we do, except they're all entirely medicalized rituals. And also we have the rituals of bringing people gift for the baby.
Mm,
Um, so I guess, what I see in rituals is this sort of communities coming round to support someone through a major life transition. Um, Having some process designed inside the community, which is again what I was saying at the beginning of the presentation, and understanding that it's a major life transition, and therefore there is stuff built into society so that you're not left alone, high and dry, to um, to manage it without the support of your elders, so to speak.
yeah,
I've been fascinated to hear, for instance, in anthropologic studies that women who breastfeed in tribal cultures have exactly the same problem as Western women, but they have around them, the difference between us and them is they have around them an entire, very close knit support of women who have overcome all these challenges like mastitis and milk supply issues and whatever. So the problem they have the same as us. It's not that they don't have it, it's just that the support is there. And I
mm,
think, when you look at the window of opportunity aspect, that, in the postpartum, what I've come to realize is it's not discussing Western science, but the Chinese traditional medical approach really says that if you do use that window of opportunity in the postpartum, it's almost like a reset button. You'll have much better health later on,
yeah,
even possibly better health than you would have had if you hadn't been pregnant.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, so
totally.
I think the rituals are designed in the context of the postpartum, designed to hold and cocoon the mother while she finds her feet. And then, because when all you have to do is rest and learn to get to know your baby, and everybody else is giving you amazing food. I've had some clients who still belong to cultures that have witnessed it. A couple of years ago, I had a couple who were both Chinese, and they moved back into my parents-in-law, his parents' house for 6 weeks, so they could have all the food and all the sort of nurturing. And I was watching all that, and I was thinking, that's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
so it's about, for me, it's about holding. The rituals are there to provide a holding through the transition, a holding through the transformation process, so that when you come out the other side, then you feel, okay, I can do this, as opposed to, oh, well, you're on your own, just get on with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of layers which we're not
Of
conscious of
course.
in the rituals. Layers of protection, layers of strength, layers of emotion support, layers of practical physical support. And what I found when last Saturday I ran a really big mother blessing for pregnant women, and what I notice every time I run mother blessings is the rituals doesn't just benefit the mother, it benefits society as a whole.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And this is one of the things I'd love to just kind of wrap it up with that, because this is one of the things we're trying to kind of reestablish, is that the health is not an individual process, right? The health, the well-being is about how we're connected, and whatever we do to accompany these processes for an individual are actually impacting us all as a society. And this is very clear during mother blessings, that how it kind of like weaves everyone there around this event. And it's like really lovely to see how there's a massive opportunity, I guess, in motherhood, to kind of like weave us back together as a society, because we're not just birthing one being, we're rebirthing society as a whole, aren't we?
Yeah. I've had some kind of vision in my head the last few weeks of thinking, what if we had a system to connect back grandmothers? In my village, I notice there are people who live alone, elderly people who have no
Mm-hmm.
connection. What if we had a way to hook back up lonely grandmothers to lonely new mothers in a way that was beneficial to both parties?
Yes, that needs to be done soon. The sooner the better. We've lost so much, but I think the work that you're doing, the work that many doulas and I don't know, people that work with postpartum, etc., are doing, is so valuable, and it's kind of getting us there. So I thank you very much for your work, for your book, which is wonderful, for your mother blessing, for all the resources you have, because they're like, you're so thorough and you have so many like ways of sharing, and that's great. So these people can access all this information in so many ways, which is great. And I thank you for being here, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Laura. I'm delighted.
Thank you, Sophie, and we'll talk soon, and we'll see you on the live for the chat.
All right. Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Bye
Bye.
bye.